Welcome to the Great African Leadership Series, where we feature great inspirational speeches and quotes from African leaders.
There are a number of individuals who are founding fathers, but are rarely mentioned when we talk about Africa. One of the individuals who came to my mind is a great South African about whom we say very little, Pixley Kaisaka Seme. The South Africans in this assembly will be aware of that great South African who was one of the founders of the African National Congress. And if they care to examine some of his early works, they will also be familiar with one of the greatest speeches ever delivered by an African, delivered at the University of Columbia in the month of April 1906, titled The Regeneration of Africa. And therefore, when he was talking about the whole idea of the regeneration of Africa, the choice of his words, because he was speaking in a foreign tongue, which I am speaking in this afternoon, he was very clear about the words that he chose. He talked about the regeneration of Africa. And when one talks about regeneration, it means that there was an Africa which had a certain level of development and that had suffered at the hand of the foreigners, and therefore it needed to be regenerated. Those of you who are familiar with the thoughts and works of Senegal's Anta Cheikh Diop will know that Anta Cheikh Diop does recognize that there was indeed an Africa which had certain levels of civilization. In fact, the more romantic historians suggest that when Europe and Europeans were still living in the caves in the western part of Africa, there were organized kingdoms and that there were libraries which rival the largest libraries in Africa today. Indeed, those of you who are students of religion like Professor here will know that people like Augustine of Hippo or Athanasius, some of the early thinkers in religion, were resident in what may today be called the Maghreb. In other words, therefore, when Pixley Kaisaka Seme was speaking in 1906, and he was talking about the regeneration of Africa, he was telling us that Africa needs to rediscover herself and that Africa needs to move a notch higher in order to find her pride of place amongst the community of nations. It is instructive, therefore, that the works and the ideas of Pixley Kaisaka Seme were to be picked and developed a little later in time by other great African thinkers, yet one who is seldom mentioned, James Emmons Kwegyir of Ghana, normally referred to as Agri of Africa. And James Emmons Kwegyir was indeed very clear in his mind. The story is told of James Emmons Kwegyir, which I'll relate to you now that I have more time than was allotted to me. And the story is one that has been told by different people in different ways, but even if I retell it in the manner which offends the original story, my point will still be made. The point is this: once an eagle, even if you feed it on chicken feed, it will remain an eagle. And he said so animatedly, it is reported, that is who an African is. He could have been fed on chicken feed, but it has never lost its eaglehood. James Emmons Kwegyir was underlining the fact that no matter how devastated you are, you will always have that inner self. And I think the person who captured it in order to lay the basis of this as an artist is a man that we call Wole Soyinka. The many of you who are Nigerians here will remember Wole Soyinka's famous writing, "The man died, the man died, the man died, the man in you must never die," and the man includes the woman. And I'm laying this basis for us to understand that when we talk about forefathers, we must never forget individuals such as Pixley Kaisaka Seme. We must never forget people like James Emmons Kwegyir. We must not forget people like Sheikh Anta Diop. And if we want to go into the diaspora, we must never forget individuals such as Marcus Garvey of Jamaica. And we must never forget individuals such as W.B. Du Bois. And one of the things that they underscored in those early days before I come to the forefathers that we are much more familiar with is that Pixley Kaisa Kaseme, in his writing and his speech, which I've already talked about, he said, in order for Africa to realize our potential amongst the Committee of Nations, there is only one thing that must define African relationship with other civilizations. He called it multidimensional osmosis. And what he called multidimensional osmosis becomes much more relevant, particularly today, when we are trading with China, when the osmosis is not multidimensional. And the osmotic is only in one direction, is monodirectional. And what he meant at that time is that Africans must engage with other civilizations, but that engagement must be of such a nature that it is mutually beneficial and the relationship is symbiotic. They could foresee that we are diverse with over 3,000 languages, and that in our diversity we could enjoy our unity. In the words of Kenya's Ali Mazrui, our diversity must not be a Tower of Babel, but it could, if we want it to be a power of Babel. They could foresee that we must recognize that we have no monopoly of wisdom or monopoly of knowledge, and it is not for us to judge, and our duty is only to fulfill our affairs. It is in this regard that I see Africa Agenda 2063 as a useful document that attempts to project into the future and to remind us that in 2063, when some of us may be alive and well, that Africa will be a continent that is respected and is not referred to in derogatory terms, whether when it is convenient we are developing, when it is not convenient we are developed, when it is convenient we are the dark continent, when it is convenient we are a rising continent, that we shall, in the words of Patrice Emery Lumumba of Congo, be in a position to tell our story, however bad that story is. That is the Africa that Kwame Nkrumah must have seen. That is the Africa that Modibo Keita must have seen. That is the Africa that Julius Kambarage Nyerere must have seen. That is the Africa that I want you to see.
And share this video with friends and family to support the channel.